Oke, selamat siang. Uh, my name is Purnama. Do you prefer me to speak in Indonesian or in English? Ja. Okay, I continue in English. Okay, so some of you guys which don't speak Indonesian maybe can follow a little bit better. Uh, so today I want to give you a talk about agile planning and estimating. I will talk a little bit about theory. I want to share a little bit about what we are doing at the company where I'm working, and what are the experience, and maybe we can do a little discussions later then. So let's start. Uh, Again, my name is Arthur Purnama. I'm software engineers in patients, IT consultants. I was working in Germany for around 10 years, studying there too. And now I'm VP Product Development at Nusa Satu Inti Arta. It's the company name. The brand name is Doku. If you know, I think you know better the brand than the company name. Yeah. Okay, if you want to know better more about me, you can see an About Me or LinkedIn. So now I want to share a little bit the situations on the company where I work now. Uh, Doku was starting 2007 as an electronic payment company. They're rebranding to Doku at 2010. And 2012 they obtained an e-money license from Bank Indonesia. And at that time they are starting another product called Doku Wallet. And now at 2007, from these two products, they serve 20,000, around 22,000 merchants and 1.4 million consumers. So from the wallet part. Okay, so this is the two biggest product from them. And there are others, small supporting products inside it. So like we are doing around 10 and more products inside Doku right now. As I'm coming last years, they are doing the traditional approach. And it was, they have challenges on that traditional approach to keep the features and the delivery of the products. And then since October last year, we tried to do an agile transformations. Okay, we have around right now 7 Scrum Masters. I'm leading the Scrum Masters. We call it Inside Change Agents. They help me to do the transformation to Agile. We have now products owners. We have the development teams. All that you know about Scrums. Okay. So we learn at Doku about how to estimate things and how to plan things news, and this is what I'm telling or try to coach the people at Doku how actually they need to think what kind of mindset, what is actually behind an agile planning and estimating. So the first things is actually this kind of uncertainty concepts. Software development, as we know, is a very complex and unpredictable things. Yeah, and we face a lot of uncertainty. I think actually everything, any initiatives, if you start something or I have an idea to do some things, you start actually from uncertainty. That's just the fact. You don't have what you say it a crystal ball to see the futures. So uncertainty is just there. Okay, and this is a graphics on of kind of uncertainty. So you have on the Y part the estimate variance, and this is the time. So if you start any initiatives, then you have a pretty big variance of uncertainty. And every time you are going forward with anything, so your projects, your initiative, then you know more. And we hope actually that the uncertainty will be smaller until somehow what you are doing is finished. If it's finished on the deadline or not, that's another thing. But somehow, if you are finished, then you don't have uncertainty anymore. Okay. So I show you the models here with a traditional approach. This is sometimes what we are thinking if we are doing something like, okay, we start with the projects, so we can have this kind of variance. Depends on how complex our initiative or our project is or our product is. Let's say, actually in these examples, times 4 is actually more on really complex things like, I don't know, building a rocket or something. Yeah. So our software product is actually around 1.5 or 2s. Okay, that means like if you think, okay, I have an initiative and I think it will be finished on 6 months, then you times 2, maybe you are wrong. Maybe it's not finished at 6 months, but 12 months. But maybe you will be finished in 3 months. So there is the uncertainty in there. And these graphs can go something like this. For example, somehow after a product definition or after the requirement complete, you already know a lot. Okay, that the uncertainty going much more lower, much more faster. But still, especially in traditional approach, you are actually not finished. Okay, so you will have many things actually that you need to have to be done, and you have actually this cloud of uncertainty. That means, well, you think you are somewhere here, but after you move forward, you find out more, and the uncertainty going bigger again. Okay, so on planning, especially in Agile Planning, we are trying to know where we are actually in this uncertainty sites. Okay, and that's why we try to do planning to look, okay, we are actually on the right track, or we know much what we want to do. So you have an initiatives. You have somehow, you want to do what, you have a goals. Without the plan, it's just a wish. So we want to plan. The problem is, so next slide. Hello? So Dwight D. Eisenhower says, the plan itself are worthless. The planning is everything. Okay? So here what he says is actually, there is a great distinction because when you are planning for an emergency, the very definition of emergency is that it is unexpected. Therefore, it is not going to happen the way you are planning. So he is actually a US Army general, so he's talking about war. But what we are working in software development, what he says of emergency is actually our uncertainty. So you don't know what in front of you. Okay? So you need, every time you plan, every time you do planning, then you have a plan, then it may happen that if you execute that plan, it's actually already worthless. Yeah? So you need to keep replanning. So let's see. This is a planning onions. If you want to plan, you normally have to align with some things actually. If you are working in a company, you have to align with their strategy, with their maybe portfolios, products. Normally, if we are doing Agile, we are actually going around this 3 last part of the planning onions. It's the release planning, the iteration, and the day planning. Okay? So every time you do your planning in this Agile, somehow you always need to see if what I'm doing already aligned with what actually the bigger plan is. Okay? And yeah. we heard a lot actually about value. Yeah, we need to somehow planning for value. Some of us, when we hear value in Agile, it's mostly about customer value, but in reality, if you're working in a company, there are another value, like for example, strategic value. Okay, in Doku, sometimes engineers doing things, they don't understand why they are doing it. Yeah, and I try to tell the product owners, well, you need to give them understanding what they are doing, because sometimes sometimes you are creating or you make a partnership with somebody which you don't think doesn't make sense, or it doesn't make sense now, but it's actually a strategic planning. So you are partnering with them because you want to do something with them later on or something like that. That's a value too. Yeah, it's not always about creating more money right now. So, and in Agile, we try to plan by features, feature instead of activity. Activity means like in traditional approach, you are starting with creating documentations, BRDs, and then technical documentation, and then you are starting to, I don't know, creating a UI, and then starting implementing, and then testing. That's an activity. The problem of activity is they create illusions of what do you call it? If that's something is finished on X%. Like for example, if people are asked in your projects, are you finished yet? No, 80%. What do you mean 80%? Yeah. Well, we are finished with development, but we are not testing it and not deploying it. So that means there is 20%. What is 20%? Yeah. And then you found out that in the testing there are many things that actually really not finished. So maybe 80% finished means there is still 80% to do. Yeah. So planning by activity makes this kind of illusions. But if you plan by features, you have actually something which is really finished, where people actually can use and take a look. Okay. Condition of satisfactions. If you are planning, sometimes you want to see. It's not actually not definition of done. Condition of satisfaction is some things like this. Please, I want to create. I want to make a features that I can transfer money from a bank. Well, transfer money from a bank, okay, it's a features, so you can transfer money, but maybe in Europe you can just say that. In Indonesia you cannot say that. You need to say, well, yeah, from which bank, from which bank to which bank, from which bank to which product, yeah. So you don't have like a satisfaction in that. So if you're planning, then you need to see what kind of conditions of satisfaction is that. Okay. So to do a planning with everything, with planning for value, with the planning for features, with the conditions of satisfactions, we need somehow a tools actually that makes that can see all that kind of plannings. And user story is what we use in Doku to define that actually. So with user story you have like the roles. So you define it, who's using it, and what kind of features is it, and what kind of values. Okay. So interesting part at Doku, if we as we starting to learn using this user story, there are many things that that we somehow still need to learn. I see a story like this. As a product owner, I want something so that I got this benefit. So if you maybe create a product like Jira or Redmine that doing a Scrum tools, maybe you can have a story like that as a product owner, yeah, because the product owner is actually the one which is using Jira or Redmine. But if you are creating something completely different, you cannot say, I want to have something. So it's like you are pointing to your team that you want to have some things. No, it's not that. A user story is that, like, you define your customer in the SA part. Okay, so I don't know, in Doku, like for example, as a wallet user, I want to transfer my my money to BCA or to Mandiri, yeah. So I don't have a lot of money in my wallet, maybe. Okay. So this is a principle that can help you guys writing a user story. This is created by somebody, I forgot the name. Let's see if I can. Mike, no, I don't think so. Please wait. Bill Wake. Yeah. This is created by Bill Wake. So his principle is that if you write a user story, it should be independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, small, testable. So as you can see, the value is always there. You need to make it able to be estimated. So not so big, it should be somehow small. Small in our definition, at least, that you can do it in your iterations. Okay, I don't call sprints. So if you use Scrum, so somehow it needs to be small enough to be done in your sprints. Okay, and it should be testable. And if you write a user story, you need to have these slice the cake principles. So that means your user story cannot be like, as a wallet user, I want to have this database implemented or something like that. Okay? Because you want to create a features, not an activity. You want to plan by the features, not by an activity. That's why if you write a user story, there should be not any vertical slice or not any part of this slice, like for example, user interface, database, or logic. So you need to define the features itself, actually. So I want to create search functions. Okay? So how long is it already? Am I talking too long? So this one is a model where you can break down your stories. Sometimes if your stories are too big, if you want to make it smaller, this one is a model where you can use. It's called user story mapping. This is much usable if you have like a front end, actually, because this is doing a user journey. So you define the activities of the user and try to break it all down to user stories. So now you have all your user stories in your Kanban board, in your product backlog, everything. Now the next thing on planning is actually prioritizing. So there are some factors on prioritizations. This is force that we use at Doku too. We use these four factors: financial value, cost, risk, and knowledge gain. So financial value, maybe some of you don't have access to how much money we need to create, but sometimes financial value you can see, like in our case, like how much transactions or how much volumes do you want to get if we create these features. Okay, so cost means like so how much will it cost if we want to do this initiative or these stories. Sometimes it's not, we are not only talking about engineers, but sometimes maybe like servers or network or something else. Okay. Well, yeah. I don't see that there is higher priority or the others. So this help you actually to prioritize. Okay. Like for example, knowledge gain. It is sometimes maybe much more important because you want to know how the market react maybe, or do we capable on doing that? Maybe we thought, like for example, uncertainty. I thought I will doing it for 6 months, for example, but after 3 months we are finished. So, and then we understand, oh, how this is how we do it, for example. Okay, that kind of spike, for example. And if we have, like for example, value and risk collected, there are some other models, risk value quadrants. Well, I'm showing this to my product owner, but honestly, I don't know if they are using it. Okay. So this is, in my point of view, pretty easy. So the first one that you need to prioritize if you have high risk and high value stories, for example, and if you have stories which is pretty high risk and don't have a value, why bother doing it? Okay. So another models is Kano models. Okay. So sometimes we want to create the basic attributes just to make it finish. But at other times we want to make these nice to have things. Okay. And then in this graphic you can see that, okay, you can find part which is good for these exciters and delighters and still have our basic attributes. So you have your product backlog or Kanban board prioritized. Now let's start estimating. In Indonesia, if we talk like, oh, somebody selling a land, then people talk with these units hektar. Oh, they sell a land 2 hektar. Oh, dia udah pernah jual tanah 2 hektar. I need to be honest with you. I don't know how 2 hektar is. I don't know. In Germany, they use football field. They use football field. So the Germans says, oh, he sell a land 2 football fields. And it seems like 2 football fields is much more easier to understand. Well, I'm not a football fan, but somehow if you say 2 football fields, I can imagine how big it is. You know how big football field is? You know? Can somebody tell me meter, width and length? 100? 100 times 50. I see 90 times 120 meters. Yeah, and that's I think sits around a hectare. If that's 90 times 120, it's around a hectare. So I mean maybe 2 hectares is somehow around 2 football fields. Somehow. But it's much more easier. I don't know. I mean we can use something else. The funny thing is in Germany, if I buy a shirts, they have 3 sizes inside it: Europe, Asian, and United States. So even shirts is not correct enough, yeah? So if I buy an L in Germany, it's XL in Asia and M in United States. It's bigger. It's bigger. So, yeah. Estimation scale. So if we are estimating, we are trying to use some scales. We are better not using times, because with scales we somehow can can unite. So we understand how big it is. Okay. And well, it's not all the truth actually. Like for example, in the shirts, I have another examples. Some times ago in Germany, my wife, or at that time my girlfriend, visiting me in I was living in a city around 70,000 people. It's actually a village. So I'm living there. I'm always walking everywhere. So I don't need the bus. I don't need a car, because it's pretty small town. And my wife visiting me, and I said, hey, let's go to electronic market called Media Markt. So let's go to Media Markt. Oh, how far? It's not far. Let's walk with me. So we walk, and we walk, and we walk, and in the middle of walk, she says, how long are we there yet? No, it's not far, come on. And then after we arrive at this Media Markt, she says, oh my God, this is very far. Yeah? Do you think so? And then she's so traumatized, and if we want to walk again in these towns, and she asks how far it is, I said 2 times Media Markt. And she already understands, wow, that's so far. Let's take a bus, yeah? But as you can see, sometimes this estimation scale can differ. Okay, so what do you think this is small is for somebody it's not so small. Okay, so we need to find a way to say, okay, that's the same scale that you said with me and you. I show you later how we are doing it. So, and sometimes if you just want to have extra large, small, extra small, it's not enough. We need to have some things where we can count on it. Yeah, and that's why we use, like for example, story points. Okay, so with story points you can have numbers, but still this is not times or anything. This is just a size that you and me first need to say, okay, we understand this size, how big it is or how small it is. Like in these examples, I say that an 8-meter house is 1 point, and 45-meter house is 5 points. We can find other numbers, but this is the numbers that we agree on, just as an example. Okay. So we have some things that we agree on, how big it is. And then we are doing planning pokers. Who is doing planning pokers here? Any problems? Yeah. So planning pokers help us actually, yeah, to agree on this size actually. So what you say is actually what I understand. Okay. With planning poker, we help actually this experts thinking. So if we are sitting together and talking about features that we want to build, and then the product owner or scrum master asking how big is this stories, and if you just let the experts tell you how big it is, then you exactly have the problem that I have with my wife or my ex-girlfriend at that time. Okay. So that's why we are planning. We are doing this planning poker games. Anybody of you don't understand planning poker game? I explain you a little bit now. Don't understand? So you have this story points numbers, yeah. In planning poker, we have I don't know, like a Fibonacci numbers. So 1, 3, 5, 1, 2, 2. There is a 2. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 40, 21, and hundreds. So it's jump a little bit, yeah. And then this question marks, okay. And that's actually the size. It's only a size. And then the product owner will say, okay, I have these stories. They explain the stories, and then every engineers will be thinking how to do it. Every engineers, not only the experts. Every engineer thinks how big it is. Take a card, put it on the tables. Everybody cannot see it. And then we count on 3, 1, 2, 3. Everybody hands up their cards, and we see how big it is. Like, for example, if this is 6 people, let's say this is 6 people, and then 5 of them put an 8, and 1 of them put a 40, then let's ask this guy that put a 40 why they think that the task is so big or the story is so big. And then you start the discussions. Maybe he just thinking wrong, or maybe the other 5 people are doing are think differently, are thinking wrong. Maybe he's right. Okay. And then after that, you start your planning poker again, and then you find somehow numbers which everybody agree on. Okay, and that's your story point for your stories. Okay. So you plan, you create the user stories, you estimate it, play a planning pokers. That's it. So this one is a model I want to show you to help actually to estimate the future a little bit. Okay, be careful with this to communicate with this, especially to higher ups, because you can create a currency with this. So they will see this as a KPI. It's actually not a KPI. So velocity. If you start your iterations, you take some user stories with points in it, and then you have the sum of the story points for these iterations. Let's say, for the sake of example, 60 story points. Okay, so you start your iteration. Fortunately, you are finished with 60. The next iterations, you take another collections of stories, and then now it's 50s. Okay, so you do it again and again and again. Now you can see actually your velocity. Okay, the velocity calculations is actually the sum of all your story points divided by the sum of the iterations. So like, let's say you have 3 iterations, 60, 50, and 70. Okay, then you have 180 story points divided by 3. So you have 60 velocity. So this is your velocity. And if you, let's say you have 600 other story points, other stories, 600 story points in other stories that you are not doing it, that means, well, you will be finished around 10 iterations later. But still, this is still in estimations, but you have something you can communicate. And my opinion is, don't say about these story points. This is pretty dangerous, because they will see it as a KPI. Just say, okay, I will finish at, I don't know, 2 months later, something like that. This is my estimation, so around 2 months later. Okay, because if you are starting, says, okay, I will finish around, I have 600 story points, I have 60 velocity and so on and so forth. They are starting. Can you bring up a little bit more the velocities? Yeah, so that you have 120 velocities. If your higher ups asking about that, then you will have an inflation of story points. It's easy actually. Instead of, I don't know, instead of 10 now, you say, okay, the story point is 20. Then you have, yeah, you will have a bigger story points. But still, it's not working. Okay. So, you plans, execute. Yeah, that's it actually. Thank you very much. You're hiring. You're hiring. Any questions? Am I good in my way? No? 5 minutes? Yeah, no. You, please.
Hello, my name is Ferdian from Mekar. I want to ask you for the slide of interdependent because you mentioned about invest in interdependent user stories. Oh. It's that long. Yeah, this one. So when you have two different story, that should be independent. Is that correct?
You try to make it independent.
You try, but in fact, sometimes it's related one of story to the others.
Yes. So, your question is how?
My question is, yeah, you say that it has to be independent. So, yeah, how can you negotiate that one story should be very independent to the others?
Okay. So, Thomas, you want to explain? Yes. So, there are no really independent stories. So, if you have stories, then you need to find which one is the most independent. Actually, that means if you have something that is independent, sometimes they're independent on one story, but the other is not independent to the other. You see, it's not like you have like, I don't know, like chicken and egg problems actually. You always have, okay, this one, the B is independent to A, but A is not independent to B. So that means we need to make A first. And then if the A is finished, B is not independent anymore. Did you follow me? Okay. Answer the questions? Yes.
You will have the whole story is actually as one feature because one feature can have different story, right?
So you thought maybe about not a spike, what do you call it? Epic, actually. So you have a big stories,
Mm-hmm.
and then there are small stories which is depending on it.
Yeah.
So these small stories need to be independent. So because it's, if you have too big, then it's not invest because it's not small. So epic is not user story. That's why it's called epic.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, okay. I get it. It should be small. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I have a question. What if after you create a story and then you already like estimate and think that it is small enough or and it is independent enough, and apparently you already give a story point and then apparently it's not. What are you going to do with that? I mean, are you going to just split that in the next sprint, or just close this story and then take the rest and put it take the rest of the task and put it into another story, create it like the split from that story, or what?
So I actually give the product owners a little bit of freedom how but don't do that again. So like, okay, I'm learning that I'm calculating too much, or I'm overcommitting or something like that. Okay, but estimating and planning need to be learned. So it's not cannot be perfect at the first time, and sometimes you need to have to give freedoms to the product owner and engineers that they can make mistakes or learn from that failure. So like if I see 6 sprints that is never finished, there's always overestimated many stories which is bring to the next and always to the next, and they are not learning actually. Yeah, on the planning of the next sprint, you actually discuss this story again, and then you say, okay, what's actually happened on this story? So should we split it, or maybe finish on these sprints and so on and so forth. So normally I give a freedom to the product team. Actually, let's do a discussion what happened with these stories. Should we split it or not? But if you have 3 stories and they are keep going to the next, it was something terrible happened actually. One question.
Okay. So I have a question. How do we define about the story point? If we in my team we have decision that to make the story point based on the complexity and also about the man hours. So how about we decided to use the complexity like Fibonacci, but how we can measure about the story point that related to the complexity, like.
So you want to match your story points to man hour.
Uh, ex- um, like if for example for the story point of one is similar with the for what man hours like that. Yes, exactly like that.
So I actually don't.
Can we use that method?
No, I don't. I usually don't want to match the story points to man hour actually.
Okay, so
So
how?
let's I don't know. Maybe this one is a good example. One, if you have like a stories which is says, okay, I do this five story points, and then somehow I'm doing it 5 hours or something. Maybe today is 5 hours, but tomorrow it's only 1 hour or something like that. So you cannot match it to man hour.
Okay, I see. But how about the if the complexity of the story, the complexity of user story, how can we measure it? If like, for example, for the sprint one, we can take the 10 story point, but for the next sprint, we can take the 20 story point. But we can measure about the story point that related to the user story. Like maybe we can just measure based on the page of the user story or anything else.
You have one concept. It's called triangulations. It's actually the same like what I say is football field. So like if you have estimate one story as 10 story points, for example, and then you have another story which is almost the same like these user stories, so it should be around 10 too. And if you see that that is estimated with 20, something is wrong. Maybe you don't understand something, for example. So that's what I mean. So this is how you measure complexities. So if that means if you think this is actually the same, but the other says this is actually more complex, then they have another triangulation thinking than you. So you need to speak to talk with each other. So I think that's how you see the complexity. Is that answering? Time is up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, guys.